Welcome back once again to Lessons from the Table. This is going to be the last one that you'll see with me wearing these clothes. I've just recorded a whole bunch in a batch because they're semi-related and I thought of them all around the same time. For the last couple of episodes I've been talking about, I mentioned, rather, 2 episodes ago, I've been designing a lot of puzzles and traps and things lately. And I said I was going to talk a bit more about why later on down the line, and, well, here's why, and here's the lesson attached to it. Do what works for your players. Do what they enjoy. My players recently have begun investigating the backstory of one of them. He is Dragonborn. He doesn't really know where he came from. He woke up on a beach, wandered over to a trading caravan that happened to be parked nearby, and just kind of traveled with them for a number of years, and that's been his life. He doesn't really know much about where he came from, and he didn't really care much either up until recently, where a couple of encounters with certain more knowledgeable NPCs who seemed to know what he was told him to return to the sea where he was found. So he's done that. The party ended up just on the outskirts of a town where they went in, found out about a dragon festival that had unfortunately just recently been. Couple of folk in town said, "Oh, there's an island just off the coast here. There's a bridge leading out to it, and we kind of dress that all up. It's part of the festival." As the player was like, "Well, I'm going to go take a look at that then." The moment they entered the structure on that little rocky island, stairs unlocked in front of them, descending downward. They went down the stairs, found themselves in a lab of some variety. They noticed one lens with the image of an island, and the image sucked them in, and now they're on a mysterious island. Now, that might sound a bit much like the plot of Myst, and it's because, intentionally or otherwise, I've drawn inspiration from puzzle games like Myst and The Witness, Quern, Abduction, which I think is by the same guys who made Myst. One of those two is. But all those sorts of games for this area. I absolutely have. I've drawn a bit of inspiration. Now, it's still original. It's not just this complete knockoff. But the inspiration is obvious. I didn't go like, oh, I'm going to have them fall into an island like what you do in Myst. It was just like, this seemed like the most logical way to make it happen, right? It was that simple. It was a reasonable way for it to play out, and it introduced them to the physicality of it before they actually fell in. He actually got to look at the map of the island for a couple of minutes before I took it away, because now they're on the island and they got to figure it out as they go. We played through the rest of that session. They arrived on the island. They talked to some dwarves in a village who talked about a couple of structures around the island. They went to investigate one of them. There was sort of a tricky journey on the way that introduced them to one of the other kind of facets of the island that sometimes time and physical space don't seem to make a lot of sense. It can be a little bit tricky, a bit illusory, but then they made it to this big structure, a fortress. This fortress was a dungeon in terms of game design. They went into it, and it was set up in a pretty simple way. I mean, it was like Legend of Zelda stuff, right? They went in, there were switches, there were puzzles, and there were monsters, and they solved it all, and they killed the monsters, and they pulled all 4 of the switches, which opened up a central turret in the fortress, which they have ascended to the top of, where they found a weapon. They grabbed the weapon, and for time reasons, that's where we ended off that session. My players came back after that and said, that was a great session. It's one of the best sessions for a really long time. There's not that the other sessions have been bad. They're like, that was really great. I like that session. Every one of them, independently, has come to me and said that. They were all really, really pleased. All of my players, who all like quite different things. And, I mean, for one thing, that, for me as a DM, is really satisfying, I have to say. It is so satisfying to put a lot of time into designing something and have it pay off like that. Because this island is expansive. There are a number of different areas that the party could go to. They could have gone to any one of them first. So I had to have all of it designed. This took me a long time to do. This was one of the more intensive sections I've designed, because there are puzzles that link various parts of the islands together. Something they solve over here might unlock something way over here. By the way, by the time this video comes out, I'm expecting the party to be done with this entire area. So hopefully this isn't going to be giving anything away to them if they do watch these. I don't know that any of them do. Man, no one watches my videos. But back to the point. They loved it, right? Man, as far as I care, they're going to be on that island forever now, right? At the very least, it's working. So if it's working, I'm going to do more of it. Because they're enjoying it. Why wouldn't I? Now, that doesn't mean only do one thing. You know, when you find out what your party likes the most, what your players enjoy doing the most, just do nothing but that for the rest of time. No, that's going to get boring. If every single session is, you know, a crawl of a dungeon with some puzzles and with some switches and with some enemies, eventually they're going to get sick of it. Eventually, it's not going to be as fun as it was the first time around. But within this contained space, I've got enough that's all just a bit different, and every single session is going to be a little bit different. The areas are a bit different. The dungeons are all different. They've got different gimmicks, different puzzles, different enemies. And hopefully by the time they're done with this area, they're going to have kind of had their fill, and they'll be ready to go on to something else. You know, maybe they'll be going into something a bit more swashbuckly later, or maybe they're going to be heading back out to the desert area that's basically a Wild West pastiche. But for now, do what works, right? Because that happened that way, I actually went back and redesigned a couple of the other parts of it. Not necessarily to make them more complicated, but just to include a bit more here and there. A bit more of that crunch that they were enjoying. I was kind of refreshed and reinvigorated with designing some parts of this. Because like I said, it had been a lot of work. I wasn't burnt out necessarily, but I'd done a lot of work for this. And I was kind of able to go back over it with fresh eyes, and that was quite nice for me. So my point is, do what works. If your players come back to you and they say, I really enjoyed that session, sometimes you'll even get from them, I really enjoyed the puzzles in that session. Make more puzzles. Put more satisfying, enjoyable puzzles in front of the players. Don't phone it in. Don't just slap puzzles in front of them willy-nilly because that's what they've said they liked. But do make more puzzles. If my players really enjoy those sorts of dungeon crawls and these kinds of areas, well, I'll include more of them in my game. Even after this particular arc on this particular island, you know, maybe they'll encounter similar things later on down the line, you know, similar kind of areas where there's a number of locations that have, you know, a dungeon-like aspect to them and an interconnectedness, a wider puzzle going on beneath it all. If that's what they enjoy, I'll do it. Do what works. Do what your players like. It's quite a short video because I think this is quite a simple concept. And it's one of those things that's really obvious when it's said. But you'd be surprised how many DMs kind of miss doing this. They don't quite do it right. And I think there's a lot of reasons for that. A lot of DMs, especially to start with, you're just kind of trying to get your head around stuff. You're running whatever is easiest for you to run, for the most part, and increasing complication as you go on. This is true of me. I've only for the first time ever run a more political arc in this campaign, the one immediately preceding this one. And I hadn't really done it before. It was a bit new, there's some challenges. My players enjoyed that too. They didn't not like it. They've enjoyed this one more. It doesn't mean I'm never going to do a political arc again. And if I do, I'm going to change it up a little bit. I think I've taken some other lessons from that, but I'm certainly going to seek to include more things like the area they are currently in. So, do what works. If your players come to you and tell you they enjoyed a session, that is amazing. First of all, it feels good. Second of all, not a lot of players do that. They'll thank the DM, but a player saying, man, that is one of my favorite sessions so far, that tells you something very important. That tells you you did something right, and you should keep doing it. Thank you very much. That's been this week's Lessons from the Table, and I'll see you next week.